Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Rausan Pereira on Rajya Sabha Television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events that have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. Scott Morrison succeeds Malcolm Turnbull as Australia's new Prime Minister. Julie Bishop loses deputy position. Peter Dutton's bid to take the reins of the Liberal Party backfires. Ex-Trump lawyer pleads guilty in deal with prosecutors. Trump claims Cohen's violations are not a crime. White House pushes back forcefully against suggestions that the plea deal implicated the president. Malaysia cancels two big Chinese projects, fearing they will bankrupt the country. East Coast Rail Link and a pipeline project cancelled for now. China says differences should be appropriately resolved. And India's Chandrayaan-1 spacecraft confirms the presence of frozen water deposits on the moon. Scientists confirm definitive evidence for water ice on both north and south poles of the moon. Scott Morrison became Australia's new Prime Minister on Friday after Malcolm Turnbull was forced out by party rivals in a bruising leadership contest. Turnbull had been under pressure from poor polling and what he described as an insurgency by Conservative MPs. Morrison, the Treasurer, won the internal ballot 45-40 over former Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton, who had been Turnbull's most vocal threat. Here's a detailed report.
Mr Morrison, I invite you to take and subscribe the oath of office as Prime Minister of Australia.
Australian Governor-General Peter Cosgrove sworn in new Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison on Friday, with the new leader promising generational change in the warring Liberal Party. Morrison, who was Treasurer under outgoing Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, emerged the surprise winner in a three-way challenge for the leadership of the Liberal Party, brought on by a right-wing rival this week. Stepping up to become Australia's sixth Prime Minister in less than 10 years, Morrison has inherited leadership of a coalition between the Liberal and National parties who has one-seat majority.
I, Scott John Morrison, do swear that I will well and truly serve the people of Australia in the office of Prime Minister, and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Australia, so help me God.
He ruled out calling a general election in the near term, but will still face an early electoral test as Turnbull is set to resign from Parliament, forcing a by-election in a Sydney seat that has been a safe seat for the Liberals.
Then we will go through the normal process of government. We intend to be governing, and we've got a lot to do as a fresh new team. So I don't think anybody should be making any plans for any elections anytime soon.
Meanwhile, Australians reacted with frustration to the news that Scott Morrison had replaced Malcolm Turnbull as Prime Minister of the country.
With Malcolm Turnbull being ousted, I think he's left his office with dignity. I think those who have come in, and Scott Morrison, who's finally won, have come in amidst a right-wing push in the government and somewhat of a bullying situation. And it really shows our politicians for the, I have to say, disgraceful people that they are.
I very much like Mel. I think very frustrated. I think, I think it's 6 Prime Ministers now over 11 years. I don't think there's been any time to develop real policy and to roll out policies. So we're not seeing anything from that. We need some stability from any party to drive and implement some policy change to Australia.
I think Scott Morrison's got an impossible task on his hands. I just think he has. I think Turnbull made the mistake of actually trying to appease the right-wing fraction of the party that were never happy with him and were always going to get him out because of what happened to APA.
China's foreign ministry congratulated Scott Morrison on his leadership victory. The ministry's spokesman Lu Kang told media at the daily briefing that China is willing to work with Morrison's new administration to promote bilateral ties.
We congratulate Mr. Morrison on becoming Australia's Prime Minister. China's position on developing China-Australia relations is consistent and clear. We believe healthy and stable China-Australia relationship is in line with the basic interests of the people of both countries and is conducive to regional and global peace, stability and prosperity. China is willing to work with Australia's new government to further push forward China-Australia relations along the correct path.
Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull is set to resign from Parliament soon, forcing a by-election in his blue ribbon Sydney seat that could risk the government's one-seat majority. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, joining me for a chat this week to talk about this is former Ambassador Shiv Shankar Mukerjee. Ambassador, thank you for joining me on the program. What are the circumstances under which Morrison was made the Prime Minister in Australia?
Well, as your report pointed out, one thing that is very clear from the reactions of the Australian public at large is that they are getting a little sick and tired of the revolving door that the leadership has become. 6 prime ministers in a decade, especially considering the fact that the election cycle in Australia is an equally short one. I mean, the House of Representatives goes to the polls every 3 years, and when Scott Morrison says people shouldn't think there'll be another election soon, it depends on what he means by soon, because in 9 months they have to go to the polls. There is the Liberal Party basically this time round, as has happened in the past, is basically tearing itself apart on leadership, on leadership tussles, based primarily on how far to the right you are. And that, in fact, to my mind, reflects a worldwide trend. The Australian economy, the circumstances are about the same, but maybe in a smaller way, that brought Donald Trump to power. The Australian economy escaped the recession that was the result in many Western countries after the financial tsunami of 2008. But over the last decade, wages have been flat. Whatever little growth there has been offset by almost an equal amount of inflation. So there has been no really good news for the average Australian, even though it's one of the more prosperous countries in the world. The conservative right, more right to that represented by Mr. Turnbull, which was represented actually by Peter Dutton, has the same grievances that led to Brexit, that led to Donald Trump. Which is a very strong feeling about immigration. In fact, Scott Morrison, who's taken over as the new Prime Minister, is the person who had that infamous policy of stop the boats, about refugees coming in by boats, stopping them on the ocean, not even letting them land on Australian shores, and pushing them off to small islands, which the Australians paid for, like Nauru, to house the refugees until such time as they could strike a deal about where they were to go eventually. But since Turnbull insisted on a written, signed piece of paper about his ouster, that, according to press reports, gave enough time for Scott Morrison to work the phones and push himself in a more favourable position than Dutton.
Right.
But we are looking at similar policies, but more right-wing, more tough on immigration, and so on, but more a reflection of a party internally tearing itself apart based on its internal contradictions.
Right. So what do you believe are the biggest challenges really as far as the new Prime Minister is concerned? Frankly, cynically speaking, I don't think he's going to be able to push through any major initiatives either, definitely not in the economic sphere, because 9 months later he faces the polls. Yeah,
so he's in a survival mode. It's been a narrow victory for him within the party. Plus, as your report quite rightly pointed out, if Turnbull quits the Parliament, the House of Representatives, And if the Liberal Party loses in that by-election, they've lost their single-seat majority.
Yes.
So Mr. Morrison
they have a wafer-thin majority there.
In that case, they won't have a majority at all. So Mr. Morrison may, wake up to the reality of not being in power, in fact, sooner than he thinks. So it's all up. I think he'll do what any other politician would be expected to do over the next 9 months, have a holding kind of pattern in policy, plus be as populist as possible, hoping for rewards in 9 months from now when Australia goes to the polls.
Where does this leave the Australians at large?
Not very differently placed from what they are at present, because
they seem to be frustrated. We saw the sound bites coming in the report.
But these are frustrations from a reasonably prosperous populace. These are the same kind of frustrations that were expressed by the reasonably prosperous people of Britain when they voted to leave the European Union and basically shot themselves in the foot. I frankly don't see any major change in policy coming about. There'll be a hardening of attitudes in terms of all the conservative items on the agenda, which boils down basically to a hatred of immigrants in today's world, and a determination to cut taxes to benefit the rich. Maybe, but even that, I doubt if Morrison is going to take the risk of it rebounding and then losing them seats in the elections that are due 9 months from now.
All right, Ambassador, we'll have to leave to that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, moving on now. Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad announced on Tuesday that he will shelve 2 major infrastructure projects by Chinese companies for being too expensive for his debt-ridden country. The rejection of the projects, part of China's signature Belt and Road initiative, was in stark contrast to the Prime Minister's cozy dinner with Chinese President Xi Jinping the day before, when they said that they were optimistic about their shared future and promised to enhance mutual political trust. Here's a report.
Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad said on Tuesday that the Chinese-funded $20 billion East Coast Rail Link project and a natural gas pipeline project in Sabah will be cancelled for now, according to media reports. Mahathir made the comments while addressing the media in Beijing during his 5-day trip to China. He said the projects would be cancelled until such time as Malaysia can afford it. The Prime Minister's office confirmed the comments Mahathir made to reporters in Beijing.
Prime Minister Mahathir emphasized during his visit that China's development is an opportunity for Malaysia. China is now the biggest trade partner of Malaysia. The trade cooperation like this brings benefit to people in both countries. But in the cooperation between any two countries, it can't be avoided that there may be various kinds of problems and different views at different times. These problems should be appropriately resolved by friendly consultations and aiming for further development of the bilateral relationship.
Prior to his China visit, Mahathir had vowed repeatedly to discuss what he called unfair Chinese infrastructure deals authorized by his predecessor Najib Razak, whose near-decade-long rule ended in electoral defeat in May amid a massive financial scandal. Mahathir said he'd relayed the matter to China and they understood the problems faced by Malaysia. The ECRL project was the centerpiece of China's infrastructure push in Malaysia, but work has been suspended pending discussions over pricing and graft accusations. Project contractor China Communications Construction Co. Limited told Reuters that more than 1,800 of the 2,250 people hired for the ECRL project had been laid off since the suspension. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lu Kang told a daily news briefing in Beijing that Mahathir had said during his visit that China's development was an opportunity for Malaysia. Both countries' peoples benefit from their trade and business relations.
Both China and Malaysia are satisfied with the outcome of the visit, and summarily speaking, the achievements are manifested in 4 aspects. Both sides indicated their firm commitment to maintaining the prolonged China-Malaysia friendship. Leaders of the two countries said that no matter how situation evolves, China's friendly policy towards Malaysia and Malaysia's friendly policy towards China will remain unchanged. Both sides further docked their plans concerning the joint construction of Belt and Road Initiative.
Mahathir said in a joint press conference with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang on Monday that he believed China would sympathize with Malaysia's internal fiscal problems. Mahathir also told the press on Tuesday that he did not bring up Loh Tak Road, the Malaysian financier wanted for his role in the multi-billion-dollar scandal at State Fund 1 MBD in his dialogue with Chinese leaders. Mahathir's predecessor Najib Razak is set to stand trial in February next year on charges linked to a multi-billion-dollar scandal at State Fund 1 MDB. Najib has constantly denied any wrongdoing related to 1 MDB. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but we'll be back with more international news on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama. I'm Rausan Pereira. Well, US President Donald Trump has insisted that payments to two women who say he had affairs with them did not break election campaign rules. It comes after his ex-lawyer Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to violating laws during the 2016 presidential election over his handling of the hush money. Here's more.
US President Donald Trump's former personal lawyer Michael Cohen pleaded guilty in New York on Tuesday to campaign finance violations and other charges, saying he had made payments to influence the 2016 election at the direction of a candidate for federal office.
Mr. Cohen pled guilty to two campaign finance charges, one for causing an unlawful corporate contribution and a second one for personally making an excessive personal contribution, both for the purpose of influencing the 2016 election. In addition, what he did was he worked to pay money to silence two women who had information that he believed would be detrimental to the 2016 campaign and to the candidate and the campaign. In addition, Mr. Cohen sought reimbursement for that money by submitting invoices to the candidate's company, which were untrue and false. They indicated that the reimbursement was for services rendered for the year 2017, when in fact those invoices were a sham. He provided no legal services for the year 2017, and it was simply a means to obtain reimbursement for the unlawful campaign contribution.
President Trump, however, said the campaign finance violations his longtime lawyer Cohen pleaded guilty to in federal court on Tuesday were not a crime, even though prosecutors and Cohen agreed they were. Trump made the claim in a post on Twitter without offering any evidence. In a separate tweet, he also said Cohen made up stories in order to get a deal. The White House also pushed back forcefully against suggestions that a plea deal struck by Cohen implicated Trump in a crime. At a press briefing, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders was peppered with questions regarding the guilty plea of Cohen on campaign finance charges and the conviction of former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort on tax and bank fraud charges.
Again, I'm not going to get into the back and forth details. I can tell you, as the president has stated on numerous occasions, he did nothing wrong. There are no charges against him in this. And just because Michael Cohen made a plea deal doesn't mean that that implicates the president on anything.
Trump also said he found out only later about the fact that payments were made by Cohen to silence two women who said they had had affairs with Trump. He added that the money came from him and not his campaign.
They come out of the campaign. They didn't come out of the campaign. They came from me, and I tweeted about it. You know, I don't know if you know, but I tweeted about the payments. But they didn't come out of campaign. In fact, my first question when I heard about it was, did they come out of the campaign? Because that could be a little dicey. From the beginning of the campaign, they tell me about this Nazi who lived in Queens, who walks the street like he owns the place. Now he's an old man, he's 95 years old, and the Obama administration was unable to pull it off, and frankly the Bush administration was unable to pull it off, and I was able to pull it off.
Cohen testified on Tuesday that Trump had directed him to commit a crime by arranging payments ahead of the 2016 presidential election to silence two women who said they had affairs with Trump. Trump has denied having affairs with the women. His lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, has said the payments were made to spare Trump and his family embarrassment and were unrelated to the campaign. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, human beings have achieved success in their quest for life-supporting elements on the moon. Scientists have confirmed the presence of ice deposits on its surface. For the first time ever, data from Chandrayaan-1 has confirmed ice deposits at both the North and South Poles. Scientists believe the deposits can be used for future expeditions and sustaining longer human stays on the moon.
The moon has fascinated poets and scientists for many centuries. Both have supported dreams of sustaining human life on this celestial body. And now, scientists have achieved a major breakthrough that could make this dream come true. The discovery of life-supporting water on Moon's surface. Data from Chandrayaan-1 spacecraft, launched by Indian Space Research Organization in 2008, has confirmed the presence of frozen water deposits in the darkest and coldest parts of the Moon's polar regions. The result comes from the Moon Mineralogy Mapper or M3 instrument aboard Chandrayaan-1. M3 was uniquely equipped to confirm the presence of solid ice on Moon.
Many scientists thought that Moon must be having water, at least in the polar regions, which are very cool because they always remain in shadow. Sunlight never falls on those areas. Until now, till the report that came on 20th, it was published in the Journal of PNAs, that is Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences. So that report for the first time confirmed that Moon does have deposits of water ice in its polar regions, the South Pole as well as the North Pole. Although the quantity of ice which is noticed on South Pole is more than the quantity found on the North Pole.
According to the study published in the journal titled Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences earlier this week, the ice deposits are patchily distributed and could possibly be ancient. At the lunar South Pole, most of the ice is concentrated in craters. At the lunar North Pole, the water ice is more sparse and more widely spread. The M3 instrument identified 3 specific signatures of the water ice on the lunar surface. Moon's water ice exhibited reflective properties of ice. M3 also directly measured the distinctive way the molecules of ice absorb infrared light.
It not only saw the reflected light from the ice which is present in the shadowed regions near the craters at both the South Pole of the Moon as well as the North Pole of the Moon. Also, the near infrared spectrum, that also was measured by the Moon Mineralogy Mapper, and from the infrared lines it is certain that there is also liquid water.
Led by Dr. Shuhai Lee from the Hawaii Institute of Geophysics and Planetology, the research team made use of the method called near-infrared reflectance spectroscopy to detect the presence of ice. This discovery makes Moon a potentially habitable destination and stepping stone for future space missions, as it would be easier to tap the water from ice on the surface that the previously detected ice buried beneath the surface. Scientists believe that the ice on the Moon's surface can be turned into drinking water for occupants of a lunar base. Scientists are also exploring the possibility of splitting it into hydrogen and oxygen for rocket fuel. Oxygen could also be used for breathing by astronauts.
Some space scientists say that water ice is found, so it may be possible for astronauts visiting Moon in future to use this ice to produce water by melting, and also to produce hydrogen and oxygen, maybe for oxygen for breathing, hydrogen as a fuel. These are all now sort of prospects that we are talking about. But as yet we don't know what is the quantity of water ice present. If that is large, then it will be definitely very useful for human beings to go to moon again and stay there longer.
NASA is now focusing on understanding the distribution of ice on the moon as a key step in their long-term ambition plan to explore Earth's closest neighbor. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, this year marks the 250th anniversary of the birth of the modern circus in the United Kingdom. Audiences are still captivated by the thrills of circus performance 250 years after its founding and are queuing up outside the most famous Gifford circus that has been running full every day. And across Britain, the age-old idiom rings true. The show must go on. I'm going to leave you with these visuals. Until next time, this is Frank Rausan Pereira signing off.
Well, to be honest, I think people are tired of watching kind of YouTube clips and being in front of their iPads. So to see, dangerous, thrilling acts up close where something can go wrong any minute, people are suddenly, rediscovering the beauty of live entertainment.